I can't imagine anybody who can bring this subject to life better than Terence Kawaja, who last year debuted a video here. I don't know if you guys remember it. That was absolutely hilarious. He's done several more of those as well, but he's going to now bring on an august panel of conversants to talk about the real-time exchanges and real-time bidding, demand-side platforms, supply-side platforms, and what it all means. Terry, take it away. All yours.
A moment of love, a dream, a lie, a kiss, a cry, our rights, our wrongs, a moment of love, a dream, a lie.
Well, good afternoon. As many of you know, I've got absolutely no connection to the British Isles. I was not born there, and I've never lived there. That said, whilst I was watching Bob Lord and Rob Norman yesterday, I couldn't help but find how compellingly much more intelligent someone with a posh English accent sounds, and I figured I could use the help, you know? Then again, why don't we just bring out our panelists. Omar Tawakol from BlueKai, Curt Hecht, VivaKi, Aaron Easterly from Microsoft, and Lance Newhouser from PH2. So I kind of feel like deja vu all over again. I just did this panel this morning, so we should have some fun. There's so many things to talk about in this space, and I can't imagine a more sort of in vogue or hotter time than right now. John mentioned a number of three-letter acronyms, DSP, SSP, RTB, WTF. I mean, nice. Honestly, it feels like there is this, massive confusion in the marketplace with a gazillion players. Does it make any sense, Curt?
Well, I think, your question's spot on, because what I say to my team, and they like to get geeky with the acronyms and talk about the technology, but at the end of the day, if our clients don't understand it, it kind of doesn't matter. And so if we can't go into a room and sit down with any one of the marketers that we work with, have it make sense and have them understand why they should be buying display in a different way than they have in the past. And the way that I like to explain it is it's a little bit like search. There's going to be a couple of interfaces. We're going to go into that and not overcomplicate it, because as soon as we make it too technical or too hard, things just stall. So that's been our approach.
But speaking of search, and Aaron, I know you're focused on display, but your business, your company is like a big search player, and there's probably a third the number of players and twice the size of the market. Is there an inverse relationship between players and market size?
Well, I think the business model for search is just a lot smarter in terms of taking highly relevant inventory and turning it into something that's valuable to advertisers. It's just a lot more refined business model. On the display side, we're still talking about appropriate metrics. We're still talking about buying methodologies. Is it reserved? Is it remnant? Is it auction? Now auction isn't enough. Now we have to have real-time auctions. And so I don't think the business model has been formalized, and I think that's partly because the diversity of content on the display side necessitates different monetization strategies. But in the meantime, it's pretty chaotic for a lot of advertisers.
So Lance, if your job is in part to sort of help your clients and help them understand the marketplace and how to best manage their media buys, hasn't your job gotten a lot harder trying to sort through the morass?
In some way it has. Just trying to keep up with all the players and try to determine who actually has something that is real and substantial and can add value to our clients is where we're spending a lot of our time. But as Curt said, it's extremely important for us to simplify and keep it basic for our clients, so that they know that when they are investing their money, it's being invested wisely, that they are putting something out that is of value to their consumers. And the advantage is there's the ability to track response, right? And see what is actually working and what is not working, and the ability to move quickly, because if we see that something isn't delivering value, then we have to make a change.
Yeah, listen, the chart that you've put out is actually a good thing in our business, because it's really, really hard and complex to understand. And when a client, there it is. So when a client looks at that, they actually need somebody to help them navigate through it. And if we have the right talent, the right technology, the right partners, and we can make that easy for them, then we can actually create value, both on the service side and then also kind of working through all of the acronyms. And if it ends up driving more for their business, then we've done our job. And that's kind of the pitch. And most of them have come around to understanding that.
So Omar, is this all your fault?
I hope so.
Data proliferation?
At the end of the day, look, an advertiser wants to buy people. They don't want to buy pages. And the whole ecosystem grew up on trying to identify people through pages, and that worked out to be not the best proxy because people shifted their time away from pages that had rich context.
So you think context is dead?
Not at all, not dead,
Okay.
but using it alone, it's too indirect. I want to get right to the person looking for a Mercedes. I want to get right to the guy who's buying a ticket to Hawaii. I want to get right to the flat panel TV person. Once I identify that, look, why does search work? Because the consumer tells you, I'm about to do something. I'm about to spend $50,000.
But
So
search-
come show me something.
But search works because there was an original influencing behavior that was created in that consumer. Oftentimes, search is looked at as that last point of connection because they've already decided what they want, or they're at the very beginning and they're wide open to any type of suggestion. I think when you say marketers are constantly looking to buy people, I think what they're trying to buy is a reaction. And we need to recognize that the marketplace is absolutely going in two paths. One, which is a data-driven inventory management approach, and the other one is still very much a custom idea-based partnership approach. And it is important to be able to blend both in order to get the full spectrum of what we're looking for from a consumer's reaction standpoint.
Yeah, I would try and take a really simplified view, which is marketers want to build their brand and they want to stand out, and that requires differentiated ideas, and a lot of times that requires to be attached to programming and content to allow them to amplify it. And then where, at least in the agency world, in the non-direct marketing side, really thinking about how addressable media can play a role, which means moving beyond demographics and age, gender, and income is a big area of growth for most marketers. Their CRM teams have focused on this, their direct marketing teams have focused on it. But our ability to build a brand and create demand with offline media and then use addressable media to really convert it and sustain it is really how we need to be thinking about building these communication plans. And underneath it, I'm happy to have my teams build the machine that's going to make the addressable piece work. But if we just get the marketing community to simplify it that way, I think we can progress much faster.
So are you saying, Curt, that a lot of this learning that's taken place on the online side in terms of the innovative analysis and optimization could then be applied to much larger markets in either e-com or TV or other offline sources?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a lot of great practices in direct that can be pulled over. I think that there's a lot of integration points in most marketing organizations between the advertising teams and the CRM teams. We've done addressable trials in television where we took, Experian profiles and brought it over into TV, right? All anonymous, totally worked. And, we saw the direct and the CRM teams go like, wow, look at all this new inventory that's out there that we can basically manage against.
Okay, when you say totally worked, are we talking 30% lift, 50% lift, 4x?
So we saw 50% lift against buying on a demographic basis in television, which was pretty damn good.
That was your like control group.
Yeah, and the media, the cost per thousand that we're willing to pay if we can get the right outcomes actually is higher, right? And so it's actually a good thing for the media owners to embrace this.
So I want to talk for a moment about the principles in the transaction, which sometimes in a discussion like this get overlooked. Aaron, everyone sort of could figure out that the advertiser's doing great by all this data optimization, right? Pricing going down and ROI going up. That sounds good to me. But for the publisher, this sort of doesn't sound so great. You guys are a large publisher and an intermediary. Pricing so far feels like it's going down. All data has done is drop your pricing. Thank you, Omar. What are you doing? What does a publisher do in response?
Well, a couple quick thoughts. The first is, our price has actually gone up over the past year or two. You could say that's basically the economy improving is driving yield improvements. We're getting a lot smarter with yield management. Our view is that we will be managing multiple channels. So we have the premium business, we have the exchange-driven business, we have the network business, and we're going to get smart about managing across and driving yield up that way. So I don't think it's universal that monetization is going down. I will say, though, that if you look at the internet, everyone talks about how great the internet has been from a business perspective, but the internet has actually destroyed a lot more business models than it has created. If you look at some of the internet companies that were once labeled infallible, huge, wide moats, you look at eBay, you look at Yahoo, you look at MySpace. There's a lot of companies out there that, while they're still great companies, they don't have the same type of mind share that they once had. And so the pace of innovation is such that the market is always going to be churning. And I don't think anyone has figured out how to manage the publisher's holistic yield management challenge. I think in some ways the demand side of the system, so the DSPs, has been a lot smarter than the supply side systems. I mean, if you look at the DoubleClick platform for publishers, that's basically, getting close to 15 years old and hasn't changed materially in 15 years. And I don't think anyone has really solved that problem. And while you have these pub brokers, the Rubicons, the AdMelds of the world, they're just scratching the surface of what publishers actually need. But I'm less actually kind of afraid that we can't figure out how to drive yield better. The question is can you create more value? And I think the better matching by the data that's brought to bear, the better targeting, the better optimization actually allows for more value creation. Then the flip side of that question is how do you capture it? How do you price fairly? And that's the piece that hasn't been figured out.
Is there any player that's effectively managing the inherent channel conflict between Tier 1 and Tier 2 inventory? Omar, is there a Uber SSP out there somewhere? It doesn't feel like it to me, but.
No, I mean, the problem you have on the publisher side right now is that it used to be that you'd have premium inventory defined as that which your team could sell. And then you have this big bucket that you throw out and you call it remnant. Well, it turns out that big bucket you threw out that was remnant had pieces of gold and diamond and silver, but you were letting the other companies pick out the gold and diamond and silver where you called it remnant as if it was a piece of trash. And that's the fundamental problem, is that you can't define something as good just because your human sold it and not somebody else's human sold it. And as the publishers get into the model of using data to figure out what's good themselves, whether it gets sold by them or somebody else, then you'll have a more customer-centric definition of good. But going back to your issue about publishers getting hurt, first of all, the publishers who create the data that's used in DSPs, they get paid for that data. So that's one way they get it. The second one is when they threw it out as remnant, someone else, like potentially Curt, came back and picked it out, and he paid more because he had reason to bid higher. So I think the fundamental reason prices went down is there's 10x the supply, maybe 100x the supply. So it's definitely not the data that's causing the price to go down.
And let me take another stab at this one too. So most media companies that we do business with, we buy from them on multiple screens via multiple channels, right? So when I think of CBS or I think of NBC or I think of Yahoo or even Microsoft for that matter, I think about a broader relationship that our clients have and that our agency network has. And so it would be foolish of us to basically go in on the display side, completely upset them on the business model when I've got to buy a Super Bowl spot, primetime inventory, and a bunch of other things too. So typically what we do is we sit down and say productively and positively, how can we work through this so that it's beneficial to the points that you brought up on the display side? And so what we found is like simple things, organizational factors, which is my team buying display is not the team that's buying all the brand inventory, right? So they're separated and they think about the task that they need to do in a way that's useful. And I think the publishers have come to understand that. They do look at yield management and they feel if it's not going the way they want to on the automated side, then they control it on the direct side. And so what I found is that just good business practices tend to govern this so that it's beneficial for most parties. But if you kind of go in with the acronyms and the technology, you confuse them into, I don't understand this, it feels dangerous to me, and therefore I'm not going to do it. And that's been a useful approach for us.
To be clear though, I don't think there are good business practices on the publisher side yet though.
Not entirely and not comprehensively. But what I have found is that going in and having a conversation around what could be, good hygiene in this space is a useful thing, and trying to help really both sides find a win in it.
So on the channel, do you mind if I,
Yeah.
on the channel conflict piece, you know, has anyone here bought a ticket from Priceline ever? Raise your hands if you've bought a Priceline ticket, right? You have. You know, that is an example of a type of channel conflict that exists in the airlines. And so, you know, why do airlines sell through Priceline when they had the potential to get a lot less than they could have sold by selling it directly? Well, they're actually think about how to segment their audience. And they say, hey, if you're last minute, you're going to Priceline, and you don't care how many layovers you have, you don't care what time you leave, there's a good chance you're really price sensitive. If you're last minute, you're coming direct and care about the time, there's a good chance you're not. So that same ticket will sell for 70% discount on Priceline, and we'll mark it up 300% when you buy with a one-day notice on the direct side. Basically, our strategy for monetization online right now is very similar. We intentionally damage inventory when we sell it through a channel. So we make it blind. We limit what advertisers can run on it. We say, hey, we're not going to have certain ad formats available. You know, so that's a similar monetization strategy as airlines to Priceline. The problem is, if you look at the offline arsenal of how you deal with channel conflict as a publisher, or someone who has goods to sell, they actually have more strategies than just damage the inventory before you give it to people. So when you buy an iPod from Best Buy and you look at the MSRP, it's the same price as when you buy it from the Apple Store. And why is that? Why do you pay the same price? Or at least there's strong incentives for the retailer to charge the same price. It's because Apple wants the retailer to compete on something other than price, compete on service, store differentiation, all those types of things. We haven't figured out that latter method to manage channel conflict online. And I think until we figure out another method to manage channel conflict other than just saying, hey, we'll blind the inventory, or we won't allow our brand advertisers to run on it, you're going to get into this really unholy cycle where the same publisher is going to be, yes, I support the scale channel. 6 months later, no, I don't. 6 months later, I support it. And I think we'll be in that cycle until we figure it out.
But I think, I mean, so we just, it's not public, but we talked about this. I mean, so we just integrated with AdECN on the VivaKi side, and we're going in direct non-buying. So we're the first ones to really do this. There's some limited inventory that's going in there that we'll see scale out to the market. And it's been really interesting because I was with Darren Houston on the sales side last week, and he's like, wow, I was kind of checking out, you know, the Hotmail pages, and I've seen the quality of advertiser actually go up, right? So, you know, the experience, because our brand marketers are the ones that are buying that inventory. And they're
I
finding
almost want to
value.
ask if the real AdECN would stand up, because I was curious if it existed.
Yeah, so you know, with AdECN, it was an acquisition Microsoft made, and the platform wasn't what we had desired, and we were unfortunately late to market. So we're relaunching it in an RTB format, basically right now. Over the next quarter or so, we'll have pretty much 100% of our scale inventory in the U.S. going through it. But you know, one of the key challenges with launching that type of system when you have a large direct sales force is that exact question.
Right.
And so it's a really tough yield management channel conflict.
Yeah.
I'm firmly in the camp of you can't swim against the tide. Your question is how to harness the wind and go to where you want. And so that's what we spent some time figuring out. And now someone, you know, a year ago, you know, I'm not sure Darren would have said, wow, I actually think quality will go up.
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
allow this.
I mean, it was
And
a
now
big fear
it's-
factor.
You know, here's where I'm going to go with that. So channel conflict only, forget about inventory. Let's talk about data. You're saying publishers, and Lance, publishers can sell their data, so maybe it's not so bad. But isn't the reality that they sell their data, but then the data gets used against them?
It can. Here's the issue. We're talking about connecting fractionalization, and we are not really looking at this from a consumer's mentality. I continue to hear, and I'm going to come off more cynical than I actually am because I happen to love data and what we can do with it, but we're talking about slicing this information down to a minuscule level so we can grab a consumer at this precise moment, these seconds where they maybe have a window where we can actually grab their attention while they're doing something else online. And we've stopped thinking about how we can use this information to actually provide a better experience and influence them and provide something that's consistent and actually create a new mentality in that consumer. But we keep going down to this narrow spot, and then all we're doing is just managing bits and bits of information as opposed to looking at the larger picture.
Omar, do you see a future where there's branded data? So I know you sell, generic auto, male 18 to 34 auto intenders. Could there be a Forbes auto intender?
We have branded data today. So in our exchange, you have people who separate those out by their brand, and there are people who put them in a pool. And the thinking is when you put it in a branded node, you get a premium, and you can command some of the terms a little bit better. So let's talk about when that data won't commoditize your online experience. So let's say that you're an auto or a travel site where someone's in market for 6 weeks. Okay, so they're going to buy a car for 6 weeks. They spend maybe 6 minutes on your site. But the data that they are in market is so valuable to VivaKi and to the OEMs that want to get them for that entire cycle that they are going to want to keep going after that consumer. And you can't stretch that 6 minutes. What, you're going to stretch it to 7 minutes?
Right.
They're still in market for 6 weeks. So that data has value to the publisher who creates it beyond the minutes they spend on their site, and they need to monetize it. And sometimes being branded does it. So I think where you lose value is if you can just identify male or female attributes that are incredibly commoditized and lower value for targeting. Yeah, that you can get anywhere.
I mean, I think you were the one who corrected me once. I was talking about the coming commoditization of data, and you reminded me that gold's a commodity, that uranium's a commodity, that weapons grade plutonium is a commodity. And so, yeah, I suppose all data is not created equal, right? I mean, we got search intent data. There's all kinds of interesting sort of levels of the quality of data. Let me skip to the sort of a data pyramid, if you will, and talk a little bit about brand, because we've all been sort of talking about intenders, and it's a very sort of DR-focused conversation. Can we talk about brand and data in the same sentence?
Absolutely. I mean, really the value of the lower funnel data half the time is just identifying who to brand to effectively and how to have differentiated messages at the top of the funnel. Honestly, I've actually seen you guys do that kind of thinking pretty well, which is not just sit at the bottom of the funnel, go upper funnel, just use the data to figure out who to brand to.
I mean, the dimensions around it, where we brought clients in was, basic retargeting, which arguably they're already a brand fan if you're doing retargeting off of a client website. But, the conversion around that's pretty high. And then, the other side to this was, how do I take an offline demographic that's in MRI, and basically pull it over into the online environment, which is way up here in terms of converting on that. So we see a ton of dimensions on what you can do.
So a lot of hype about the DSP space. Finally, now we're starting to see some activity. I had a fun little deal last week with Invite Media. So flash poll here of the panelists. Who is a buyer of DSPs at current market multiples? Hands up. So I asked a room of that earlier, and there was 80 people in the room. We got one hand, and he was the CEO of a DSP. So that is not surprising. Any thoughts as to implications? I mean, I would make the argument that, Google's making some major headroads, and they've been, basically the whole industry's been on notice for 3 years that they're coming to display, and every month or every quarter when they announce yet another, arrow in their quiver, it's kind of inevitable. Aren't they going to eat the lunch of everyone on this panel?
I'll tell you that. We need a competitive marketplace. Right now, I believe RMX, probably from a share perspective, is doing best, and you've got AdX kind of gaining steam. You've got Orange in Europe. You've got OpenX powering that. So there's enough activity. You've got Microsoft in there. But I totally agree. Like, we don't run Microsoft or Orange or a lot of these guys, and we definitely want a competitive marketplace. I think Google wants a competitive marketplace, quite frankly.
Lance, you get the final word. Is Google coming to eat your lunch?
I think if we can't figure out how to add value beyond what Google is doing, then we're in trouble anyway. So we've got to continue to either develop our own algorithms, make sure that we are finding unique inventory or figuring out something that consumer actually wants and layering it on top. Because if they can take our lunch, then they deserve to take it.
There we go. Thank you very much.